And let's go. Okay, so this session today is for international students and it's alternative options about working in the UK after your studies. So we're talking about some of the visa options here. My name is Rachel Hacking. Thanks, Rihanna, for the introduction. I'm Senior International Student Advisor in the Advice and Counselling Service. You can find out all about the Advice and Counselling Service by looking at the link on the bottom of your screen. As Rihanna said, please do record your attendance. The QR code you can see on your screen will also record your attendance if you forgot to do it just now. Okay, so we're going to go through the presentation and there will be some time for general questions at the end. We're not able to answer very specific questions about your situations, but it may be signposting to where you can find the guidance for yourself. First of all, I just want to talk about advice and counselling, so you're aware of the support available for you during your studies. So the Advice and Counselling Service, we are a free service available to Queen Mary students, and we are confidential, and we can help you with any personal, emotional, financial, legal or welfare issues during your course. So today I'm talking about immigration. I'm one of the international student advisors, but you could also get advice about money, or if you're having emotional issues, mental health difficulties, you can access our service as well for specialist, professional and confidential support. So you can find out how to access our service, and there's loads of self-help materials as well on our website. So do have a look through our website to find out about the support available for you. But for now, let's go back to working. Okay. So the aim of today's session, we're going to just give a brief overview of the main routes for staying in the UK and working after your studies. The main purpose of this session is for you to be able to find the information, to be able to research yourself the different visa options. We're not able to give detailed advice about working after studies, but Rihanna and I, we are planning a session with a lawyer where there will be more bespoke, more specific guidance. So do look out for that and sign up for that if you're interested in the categories that I'm talking about today. So the information I'm providing is available on the Advice and Counselling website and also on the UK Council for International Student Affairs website, UKISA, but we wouldn't offer one-to-one advice about immigration categories outside of the student visa route. Our speciality in advice and counselling is the student route. And that's what we use our resources for as well. So student immigration permission, but we can tell you, we can give you some signposting where you can find information about the other options available to you. I am going to talk a little bit today just about working with student immigration permission, so making the most of your student visa. And then finally, we'll talk about how and where you can get further information and advice about the visa options. So although today's session is not specifically about the graduate route, I did just want to mention the graduate route. There was a session on the graduate route on Monday with my colleague Paola. You can access the recording to that session. But just for a bit of an overview of the graduate route, so the graduate route is for people who've successfully completed their bachelor's or master's or PhD to give them time to look for work in the UK. You would be granted 2 years or 3 years if you graduate, if you're awarded a PhD. The cost is £822, plus you also have to pay the higher rates of the immigration health surcharge. There are a few restrictions apart from you can be self-employed, so that's a benefit. You can't be an entertainer or a sports person, so those are the restrictions, but you can work in whatever job you want to work, or you can be looking for work. And at the end of your graduate route, if you get the sponsorship, you may be eligible to apply for the skilled worker visa. So if you're interested in this visa route, well, first you have to successfully complete your course, but do have a look at the detailed information on the website you can see in your screen to start preparing yourself. Watch the video from Paola from Monday and get ready for the graduate route. But there may be reasons why either you don't want to apply for the graduate route or you may not be eligible to apply for the graduate route. And that's why we're talking about the different visa routes today. So you have to have had a student visa for a minimum amount of time, and you have to have been in the UK while on a student visa, and at the point you apply, you have to still be in the UK with a student visa. You can't bring any new dependents, and you must successfully achieve the award which was your CAS was issued for. You can't extend graduate route, or you can't apply again, and you wouldn't be eligible to study on most courses whilst you're holding graduate route permission. The main one that students report is that it doesn't count towards the 5-year route to indefinite leave to remain in the UK. So if you're planning to stay in the UK long term, if you want to live in the UK, if you want to get permanent residency, then this is not the quickest route to do it. Some of the other working routes that we're talking about today, you can get settlement, you can get indefinite leave to remain after 5 years. The graduate route is not one of those visa options. So that might be a reason why you're looking towards the other options as well. Okay. So a question for you, if you could put the answers in the chat. What do you already know? What other visas apart from the graduate route? What other visas are there for you to apply for work or to work in the UK? Please pop your answers in the chat. We've got a few coming in. Any more that you're aware of? I'm just going to give you another minute to think about it. Okay, thanks everyone. There's actually a lot more visas than you have mentioned. So you've mentioned some of the main ones, and they're the ones that we're going to focus on today, but there are actually a lot of others. Okay, so these are just some of them. You mentioned skilled worker and global talent, and we will be focusing mainly on the skilled worker route, or somebody called it the sponsored worker route. That's the same thing, the skilled worker route. The global talent we'll talk about a bit. We'll touch on some of the other more common ones that you can see on your screen. Yep, and be aware that there are other visas available as well. So it is worth doing your research. But let's start by talking about the skilled worker route. So with the skilled worker route, you're sponsored by an employer to do a specific job. So just like at Queen Mary, you're sponsored for your studies. Under the student route, for the skilled worker route, you're sponsored by your employer. Your employer must be listed on UK Visas and Immigration Register of Sponsors. It's a very long document. There were 121,468 entries when I checked earlier this week. So it's a massive list. It does get updated frequently, so it's worth checking at the point you're looking to apply. The job level that you're doing must be RQF level 3 or higher. So A level level or higher than that. There is a minimum salary, so you have to be earning the minimum salary, which we'll go into in a second. I'll just go in outline the requirements. So just like for your student visa, Queen Mary had issued you a CAS. For your skilled worker route visa, it's a COS, a certificate of sponsorship. It's similar, it's an electronic document, and that would come from your employer. So as long as you're studying at Queen Mary, you can apply, well, anyone can apply outside the UK, but you can also switch inside the UK from your student visa. As long as a certificate of sponsorship, the course start date is after your course completion date, you can apply no more than 3 months earlier than that. Or if you're undertaking a PhD, then you've completed at least 24 months of your PhD. But yeah, this is just if you're studying at a higher education institution. So this is relevant for you Queen Mary students. You do need to have either completed or be in the 3 months before completing. But also you need to meet your employer's requirements. Your employer might stipulate that they want you to complete your course first, in which case that is a requirement for you as well. So the skilled worker route is part of the points-based system. So you will see on your screen, there are 50 mandatory points for sponsorship, skill level, and English language, and then 20 tradable points as well. And you have to acquire that amount of points in order to be eligible to apply for the skilled worker route. Okay, so let's start with the 50 non-tradable points. So we already mentioned that you need to get a certificate of sponsorship from an employer who's listed on UKVI's register of sponsors. So that's for 20 points. Your job needs to be at RQF level 3 or above, and that's worth 20 points. And your English language must be at level B1 or above. Your degree from Queen Mary will evidence that you meet the English language requirement. You must meet all of these requirements. So these ones are not optional. You must have all of these things in order to be eligible to apply for the skilled worker visa. Okay, so now we've got the tradable points, and that's all to do with your salary. And you must meet the salary requirement. That is a requirement to be earning the minimum salary. The amount of salary that you need to be earning depends on your situation, and that's why it's tradable. In the first instance, check with your employer. Your employer knows the rules, the occupation codes, how much you should be earning for them to be able to issue you a certificate of sponsorship. Note that you need to be earning a minimum salary. So the minimum salary or the going rate for the specific occupation, whichever of the two is higher. So minimum salary, depending on which of the options you fit into, but also the going rate for the specific occupation. So depending on the job you're doing, you need to meet whichever of these two is the highest. You need to be earning that in order to be eligible to apply. So many students, I would say almost all students who are applying straight after completing their Queen Mary degree will meet option E, which is outlined in paragraphs 12.1 to 12.3 of Appendix Skills Worker of the Immigration Rules. So this includes if you're switching from a student visa and you've been studying a bachelor's, a master's, or PhD. So if you've completed your bachelor's, master's, or PhD, then you would meet option E. If your most recent permission was a graduate route visa, also you will meet option E. So if you complete your master's, let's say, and then you get a skilled worker visa just for a couple of years, you meet option E. Sorry, if you get the graduate route for a couple of years, you meet option E. If you then apply for the skilled worker route, you can still be eligible under option E. The other one in option E is if you're under 26, you're also eligible for 26, but you can read the guidance listed. I've put the hyperlink in, so we'll send round the slides and you can click on it to read all of the criteria for option E if you're not sure. I'm just going to read out paragraph 12.3 because it's quite important to note that it says granting the application must not mean that the applicant's combined permission as a skilled worker, graduate and or tier 2 migrant, so tier 2 was before the skilled worker, would be more than 4 years in total, whether or not the permission is for a continuous period. So you can only meet option E if you've had skilled worker, graduate, tier 2 in combination for no more than 4 years in total. Okay, so we said, I think most, if not all students are going to meet option E because you will have finished a bachelor's, master's or PhD at Queen Mary and you're switching, or you're under 26 or you're switching from the graduate route. In which case, the minimum salary for you will be 30,960. That's the minimum salary, but also it needs to be above 70% of the going rate for the occupation code. So depending on which job you're doing, the code for the job that you're doing has a minimum salary for it, and you need to be earning at least 70% of that minimum salary. So if 70% of the going rate for your occupation code is less than 30,960, you need to be earning 30,960 minimum. If the going rate for your occupation code is higher than £30,960 per year, then you need to be earning that higher rate. So it's whichever of the two is higher. I would say if you're not sure, you can check with your employer, because your employer needs to make sure that you're earning the correct salary before they issue you a COS. So this is just for your information. You can tell your employer that you meet option E, double check that you meet the requirements of option E. If you do meet option E, you can tell your employer, I meet option E, and then they can calculate what the minimum salary should be depending on the job that you're going to be doing. There are some other requirements for the skilled worker route, again, depending on your situation. So probably most of you, I expect, will be thinking you'll apply inside the UK, but if you're applying from outside the UK, or if you're applying from inside the UK, but you've not been in the UK with immigration permission for at least 12 months, then you would need to meet the financial requirement. So funds of at least £1,270. Certain entry clearance applications require a criminal record check. So if you're applying from overseas, as we said, probably you're thinking you're going to be applying from inside the UK. If you are required to apply outside the UK, then depending on the job you're doing, you might require a criminal record check. Again, depending on the job, you might need ATAS clearance. Some students need ATAS clearance depending on the course that they're doing at Queen Mary. So again, it's going to depend on the job that you're doing. If you're doing research in a certain area, you may need ATAS clearance. Again, you should check this with your employer because you would need to apply well in advance of your job starting. And there is a genuineness requirement as well. So in the same way that the student visa, you're required to be a genuine student. To obtain the skilled worker route, the UK government must be convinced that you are genuinely able to undertake the role for which you're being sponsored. Okay, I have put the link on the screen to the main guidance here. This is the main guidance of the skilled worker route. So have a look through the requirements. As I'm just giving you an overview, not all of the requirements will apply to you, but what we said, the mandatory requirements will apply to you, and you'll need to check with your employer about the salary level depending on the job that you're doing. Okay, so I often get questions about what you can do with a skilled worker visa. So just added it in here. So with a skilled worker visa, you are sponsored by your employer. So your main purpose for being in the UK is working in the job that's listed on your certificate of sponsorship. So you're sponsored, you need to be attending your work, you need to be working. If you changed your job or if you left your job, this would have implications on your visa. You'd need to apply for a different skilled worker visa to do a full-time job with another employer. You can do supplementary and voluntary work, and you can study as long as it doesn't interfere with the job that you're being sponsored to do. So like I'm saying, your main purpose is to work for the employer in the role that's listed in your certificate of sponsorship. You are allowed to do other things as long as it doesn't impact on that work that you're being sponsored to do. You can bring dependents to join you, so husband, wife, children, unmarried partner. And we were talking earlier about the 5-year route to indefinite leave to remain or settlement. So there is the possibility of settlement after 5 years, subject to certain conditions with the skilled worker visa. And in terms of how long you will be issued a skilled worker visa, I'm just going to read from the immigration rules. You'll be granted entry clearance or permission to stay until 14 days after the end date of your certificate of sponsorship. The end date of the certificate of sponsorship may be up to a maximum of 5 years after the start date of the certificate of sponsorship. Okay, so you're going to get the visa for 14 days after the end date listed on your course, and the maximum time you can get is 5 years. And the conditions are outlined. I've put a link in for you again. So we're on Appendix Skilled Worker, paragraphs 18.1 to 18.2, just outline what I've been saying to you, the conditions if you obtain the skilled worker visa, what you can and cannot do. Okay, I just wanted to mention the health and care worker visa because I know we have a number of students at Queen Mary who are studying health related courses. Anyone on the call here today studying health related courses? If you put your hand up if you are. Yeah, we've got at least one of you, so I am going to give you this information. Thank you, 2 of you. So it is actually very similar to the skilled worker visa in terms of being sponsored and the minimum salaries, etc. And what the purpose of this one is to allow medical professionals to undertake an eligible job in the NHS supplier and NHS supplier, or in adult social care. Okay, so you can have a look again on the government website linked in front of you. It's worth being aware if you're interested in working in healthcare in the UK, and there is a need for people to be employed in healthcare in the UK, then this could be a good option for you. I've seen a few students recently who have successfully applied for this visa, so do have a look at this one. I should mention at this point, I've also seen a few students recently who've successfully applied for the skilled worker visa. So it is possible, students do it. I know it is maybe more difficult than the graduate route because you need to get employment, you need to get sponsorship, but it's possible. So don't rule it out. Look at the register of sponsors, see if this is going to be an option for you as well. Okay, so moving on to global talent, which is another actually popular visa route we have seen recently with actually quite a large number of our students, particularly PhD students, being successful in applying for global talent endorsement and then the global talent visa. So just an overview. So this is for leaders or potential leaders. There's 3 different strands. It's either academic or research, arts and culture, or digital technology. So the process differs slightly depending on which of these strands you would be eligible for. Normally you need endorsement, and the application process, yet, like I say, it was slightly different depending on the strand that you're applying through. The cost is £716 per year, and as with all of these routes, you'd also have to pay the immigration health surcharge. The benefit of this route is it's not sponsored, so you're not tied to your employer. You can work in any kind of job, and you are allowed to study. You can apply inside or outside the UK. Your visa is granted for up to 5 years, and there's a possibility of indefinite leave to remain after 3 or 5 years. In order to be eligible to switch from a student visa into the global talent visa inside the UK, then you must have completed your current course. So actually, this is quite a favourable route. If you are a leader or potential leader in one of those fields, it's definitely worth looking into. It's the conditions can be quite flexible, and it leads to settlement quite early. I mentioned a few students have told us recently that they've successfully applied for the Global Talent Visa. So we have a case study here, Sarah, not a real name, a PhD student from EECS. So her colleagues had applied, so she also applied. She found the application process easy, and she didn't need the support of a solicitor or immigration advisor. So it's possible that you can complete it on your own without that support. And I'm just going to leave this one on the screen for you to read her advice to other people who are thinking about this route. I just saw a question in the chat, which I will address now. Most of the questions we'll do at the end, but the question about whether a master's student can apply. So I'm just going to go back to show you there's not a requirement that you have a PhD. The requirement is that you're a leader or a potential leader in one of those fields. So the students that I've seen who have successfully applied have been PhD students, but it's not restricted to PhD students. So if you're a leader or potential leader in one of the fields that you can see on the screen, you could apply still. Yep, you're still eligible. You need to be endorsed. So it's worth all of you looking into if you are a leader or potential leader in one of the strands that you can see on your screen. I'm just going to rush through because I just want to get through the whole presentation and have a little bit of time for comments from Rihanna and any questions. So just going to do a very quick summary of some of the other visa routes that we mentioned at the beginning, which we see students do tend to be eligible for or apply for sometimes after they've completed. So the youth mobility scheme depends on your nationality, and it depends on your age as well. So if you're one of the nationalities listed or a British Overseas Territories national, and you're younger than 30 or 35, depending on your nationality, then you may be eligible. This application needs to be made from outside the UK. You can't apply inside the UK, but it gives you 2 years to come to the UK, and you can work, you can study, you can look for work. Your main intention should be to work because it's a working visa. But you do have, it is quite a flexible option. So if you're lucky enough to be young and one of these nationalities, that might be something you consider. Yeah, it's worth looking into. Similarly, there's the India Young Professionals Scheme, which obviously for nationals of India, it is similar to the youth mobility. There's a competitive ballot that opens at certain points of the year. So it is a competitive process, like in some of the other youth mobility countries as well. There's a ballot and it is competitive. So it just depends on how the process works for nationals of your country to how competitive it is. The innovator founder route took over from the startup route and also the innovator route. So this was a new route for people who have a really good business idea, for people who want to start an innovative business in the UK. It does require endorsement. Obviously, you can't be self-employed while you're on a student visa, but once you get the innovator founder visa, you've got an innovative business to set up, you're endorsed by a company, you could get this 3-year visa. High potential individual is similar to the graduate route, but from institutions outside the UK. So if you have a degree from a country on the list outside the UK, you apply for this again from outside the UK, just a 2 or 3 years for PhD, and it cannot be extended in the UK. There's a temporary worker visa, the government authorised exchange and other temporary work visas. Temporary worker routes could be useful just if you want to gain work experience for a short time in the UK, but you don't plan to stay in the UK long term. Yeah, this one's a maximum 2 years, and then you'd need to leave at the end of that period. I just wanted to mention sabbatical officer. If you take a role as a sabbatical officer, you can apply for student immigration permission and work full-time as a sabbatical officer at Queen Mary's Students' Union for a maximum of 2 years. So we've had a few international students over the last few years who've applied to be a sabbatical officer. This is a good opportunity to get some work experience in the UK as well. So look out for the elections happening, Queen Mary's Students' Union. There could be a number of other situations that allow you to stay and work in the UK that are not specifically working visas, but they do allow you to work in the UK. So I think somebody mentioned at the beginning spouse visa. So there's family visas. If you're a family member if you're the relevant family member of a British national, or somebody who has settled status in the UK, or has an alternative status which allows them to bring dependents, or the EU settlement scheme, then you may be able to apply for a visa on the basis of your family member. And that visa is likely to allow you to work in the UK as well without restrictions. You may also be eligible for a visa depending on your nationality. So we spoke about youth mobility. If you're a Commonwealth citizen, you may be eligible for an ancestry visa if you meet the criteria. If you're a BNO, you might be eligible for a BNO visa. So I think the point I'm trying to make is there are a lot of different options depending on your circumstances. And it is worth looking into all of the options thoroughly to understand what's available to you and to be able to make an educated decision about what's the best route for you, depending on your future plans and what you're planning to do in the UK now. Usually we do get questions about indefinite leave to remain, so I'm just going to touch on it briefly. So we said some of the routes allow you after 5 years to apply for indefinite leave to remain, so including the skilled worker route, global talent route, and innovator founder that we've spoken about. So after 5 years and meeting all the other requirements, then you can get indefinite leave to remain in the UK sooner. If you're not on one of these eligible routes, then you might be on the 10-year route to indefinite leave to remain. So for example, student visa, graduate route visa, you would have to have up to 10 years to then be eligible to apply for indefinite leave to remain in the UK. Yeah, and there may be some other requirements. So pass a life in the UK test, salary requirements, and there's limits on spending time outside the UK. So if this is your plan, it's worth thinking about now and preparing in advance. The most important thing to do is, if you are considering applying for indefinite leave to remain, is to get that specialist advice. So an immigration solicitor, lawyer, advisor who has the expertise in indefinite leave to remain to make sure that you're meeting all of the criteria. Just a note about making the most of your student visa. So if you're studying degree level or above, so degree, master's, PhD, you can work maximum 20 hours per week during term time. That's a total of 20 hours per week. There's no limit to the work that you're allowed to do during the official vacation period and after the formal end date of your course. So that's the end date listed on your CAS. The end date would be demonstrated by your CAS and your student status letter. Queen Mary doesn't provide a bespoke letter saying you're allowed to work full-time because it's the employer's requirement that they check that you're able to work full-time. So they'll check your share code and then you will provide the student status letter and your CAS to demonstrate your end date has passed. If you're a master's student, then the dissertation period is term time for you. This is a very common question. So September to September masters, your only vacations are the Christmas vacation and the Easter vacation listed on Queen Mary's academic calendar. During the summer period, this is not holiday, so you need to restrict your working to no more than 20 hours per week. And as a student visa holder, you're not allowed to work as a self-employed person and you're not allowed to undertake business activity. That's prohibited as the conditions of your student visa. And you're not allowed to take a permanent full-time job. So we said you can work full-time during the official vacations and after the formal end date of your course, but you can't take a permanent job. It should be a temporary job whilst you're still under your student conditions. Just while we're talking about generating a share code, maybe it's useful to mention at this point that all of you should create an e-visa account if you haven't already. You will need an e-visa account to be able to demonstrate your right to work, your right to study, your right to travel. Really important that everybody creates your e-visa account because BRPs are expiring on the 31st of December 2024. You need to have your e-visa account to demonstrate your status after that. I'm going to put the link to our information in the chat after the session or after I've finished speaking so that everybody can go away and now create your e-visa account if you haven't done that already. Okay, but back to working, things to consider when you're thinking about the different working options for working after studies. So am I eligible for a different visa? Is it just the graduate route that I'll be eligible for, or have I researched are there other options I'm eligible for? Does my employer have a sponsor license for the skilled worker visa? Is the job eligible for sponsorship? Is it the right level? Am I earning the right salary? Do I want to stay in the UK and apply for indefinite leave to remain? That's quite an important question to think about because that might make the difference between applying for the skilled worker route or the graduate route. The skilled worker route will get you indefinite leave to remain more quickly. Do I value flexibility more than being sponsored? So the graduate route is very flexible. Global talent route is flexible. Remember, you can do any job. You could be looking for work. You're not tied to an employer. Whereas the skilled worker route, the healthcare visa, you're tied to the employer. So there isn't the flexibility about changing jobs. Well, you can change jobs. You'd have to apply for a new visa in order to change your jobs. And some last thoughts for you. We've got Rihanna on the call today. Rihanna is from the Careers Service and they have really detailed and useful resources and information to support you in looking for jobs. So do use those resources, get the best out of them. If you're currently financially sponsored by a government or international organisation, you may require consent from that sponsor to be able to stay in the UK. So figure that out in advance, speak to your sponsor in advance if that's something you do require because it might take some time to get it. The applications we've spoken about today are all quite expensive. As well as the visa application fee, you will have to pay the immigration health surcharge for almost all the categories we've spoken about today. It's the higher immigration health surcharge. So it is a significant payment that you need to make, and you need to make it upfront at the point you're making your visa application. So you need to prepare the funds. Check the requirements thoroughly. As we said, I've given you a really brief overview, but you need to look in detail at the different routes available and whether you meet those requirements. And you may have to seek specialist immigration advice. As I said, in advice and counselling, we can't advise you on these other categories. If you want advice, you can seek a specialist immigration lawyer or speak to your HR department if you've got an employer, to get that specific advice about these routes. And as well as paying for the visa application fee, the IHS, you may need to show maintenance depending on which of the routes you're going for and where you're applying, and you will need to prepare that in advance, so factor that into your considerations as well. Okay, so the UK Council for International Student Affairs has some really detailed information about some of the options we've spoken about today, some of the options that we haven't really touched on today. So I would say your first port of call is to have a look at that guidance. You can see it on the screen in front of you now, to get an idea about the different routes and to refer back to it. Yeah, as we said, so in the advice and counselling service, we'd only be able to provide information. We can link to the UK government web pages where you can find more detailed information. Of course, if you have a question about your student visa, then do have a look at our guidance, get in touch with us. Our speciality is in student visas, but have a look on the website. You can see on the screen in front of you. UKISA, the web page that you just saw, also has a telephone line if you have questions and want to speak to somebody. And if you are seeking external advice, then do make sure that it's from a regulated immigration advisor. So you can check through ILPA, Immigration Law Practitioners Association, to ensure that the immigration advisor is regulated and is permitted, is legally allowed to provide you with that immigration advice. It's important you get it right, because the implications of incorrect advice can be significant for you. You want to make a successful application, so do get that correct advice, and the links you can see on the screen are where you can find a regulated advisor from those institutions. And for those of you who arrived late, I've put on the screen again the QR code to register your attendance. So that was an overview. I'm going to have a look at the questions to see if there's any that we want to answer all together that would be useful for everyone.
Just going to end the recording now, and then we can move on to questions.